time together this week will be spent here in the 12th chapter of the book of Hebrews and upon the subject of unshakable faith. And do we ever need that kind of faith in a time like this? I'm so thankful for the providence of God that brought us to this chapter and these verses during this moment in our nation and in our personal lives. He is faithful. I'm also thankful that there are 2 more Tuesdays left in the month of September, and I think we're going to need both of those to get through this chapter together. Hebrews chapter 12 opens with the word wherefore, which directly ties it to the chapter that precedes it, Hebrews chapter 11 and Faith's Hall of Fame. And it also reminds us of our personal responsibility. Wherefore, let us. It is tying us to that because they did. Here's what we need to do. I feel like the entirety of chapter 12 should be viewed through the lens of faith. And when it's seen in that light, it takes on an entirely different perspective. For the sake of time, I want to begin our reading at verse 27. Then we're going to kind of work backwards into the chapter, or at least return to the beginning of the chapter. Here in verse 27, the writer reminds us of a sobering possibility. Let's read it together. And this word, yet once more signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken. The removing of those things that are shaken. Paul reminds us in his letters to Timothy that in the last days perilous times will come, that some will depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, and we are there. There is a sobering possibility at the first part of this verse. But as blood-bought believers, we don't have to become a part of that falling away, because he also reminds us that we have a steadfast position, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. There's a shaking coming, and those things that can be shaken are going to be removed. But there are some things that cannot be shaken. Verse 28, the first part of it, it says, wherefore we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved. I'm glad that there is a steadfast position in a time of shaking. We can be shaken up, and we have been, but we do not have to be shaken out. There is an unshakable faith when everything around us is shaking. And in our time together today, I want to begin looking at this chapter as part of a sovereign process. God has a plan, God has a purpose, and God has a process of getting us there. There are at least 5 pieces to this process that I'd like to begin looking at together today. I want to begin by returning to the first of the chapter with a simple reminder that finding an unshakable faith requires us to run the race that is set before us. Wherefore, seeing we are also compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Wherefore, looking back, let us, because they did, this is what we need to do. This is our day in the arena, and it's up to us what we do with it. Now, I realize a lot of what we're going to cover in the rest of this chapter is not popular, nor will it ever be popular in the pulpits of a lot of American churches today. And if fire insurance is all you're looking for, I may not have a lot to offer you. It seems to me that escaping hell and slipping into heaven is all that concerns most of what calls itself Christian today. But if, like me, the portraits in the hall behind us and the prospects on the highway ahead of us have challenged you to leave the land of complacency and to do your best to be your best for Christ, I invite you to come with me today on this journey to find this unshakable faith. Let's lay aside the distraction, look in the right direction, and run with determination. Let us run. Number 2, the second step is probably the most unpopular part of the entire process. but it is without doubt one of the most important aspects of it. To find an unshakable faith, we must run the race that is set before us, and we must receive our chastening as sons. Verses 5 through 11 introduce a subject that I guarantee you're not going to hear on the Peace and Prosperity Network. It's called divine discipline. But contrary to the theology of American culture, this isn't all about me. And God's supreme goal is not my happiness. It's my holiness. And I'll give you another Charlie Kirk quote. There is a God, and I'm not him. There is here in this passage a reminder. Read verse 5. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. Wow, that flies directly in the face of what's being propagated in the American pulpit today. Sometimes pain is part of the process. C.S. Lewis said in The Problem of Pain, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but he shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. If you can't learn by hearing, then you'll have to learn by feeling. That's the way I had to learn most of the time growing up. But God loves us too much to let us miss his purpose, his plan. So when we don't learn by hearing, then we must learn by feeling. Think about Jacob. The process nearly killed him, but in the end, the cheater became a champion. There's a reminder here about our chastening. But the key to understanding this is the fact that discipline is actually proof of relationship. Look at verse 6. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. If ye endure chastening, verse 7, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? Everybody wants to be the child of God until it's time for the chastening. But who was it said that God only had one son without sin, but he's never had any sons without suffering? Again, it flies in the face of modern ministry. Verses 8 and 9 continue the same theme of the father-son relationship. See, we have the wrong view of discipline. Discipline is not something that we do to our children. That's abuse. Discipline is something we do for our children because we love them. And that brings us to the thought I'm going to end with today. There's a reminder, there's a relationship, and there is a reason. We don't understand what God does, but there is a reason for what God's doing. Verse 10, for they verily for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure, but he for our profit. We have to have that relationship to understand that what God is doing to me is for my profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. Wow. Now, no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Now and later. Our good, God's glory. Let me close with a story from Elizabeth Elliot. She shared it in a missions conference in 1976, and most of us are aware that her first husband, Jim, was martyred by the natives, and how she went back and ministered to those people. Such a wonderful story. But what is less commonly known is that her second husband, she remarried, her second husband died of cancer. I mean, terrible, terrible situation. During that recovery process, she told about traveling to spend some time with some friends who were sheep herders. And as she watched that shepherd, one day he was treating his flock for parasites. And she said that she watched as the shepherd's dog would drive those sheep up a ramp, at the end of which they would plunge into a tank that was filled with the treatment for those, the antiseptic treatment and the treatment for those parasites. That when the sheep, she said, as the sheep would struggle to get out, the dog would snap and bark and growl in their faces, and they would turn them back into the tank. And when they finally struggled to the opposite side and hit the ramp to go out, then the shepherd would take a wooden implement and grab those rams by the horns, throw them back down into the tank, and hold them under the water. She turned to the shepherd's wife and she asked the question, do those sheep have any idea? Do they have any understanding about what's happening right now? And her hostess replied simply, they have no clue. This is what Elliot said. I've had some experiences in my life that have made me feel very sympathetic to those poor rams. I couldn't figure out any reason for the treatment that I was getting from the shepherd. I trusted, and he didn't give one hint of explanation. But, she pointed out, we must trust our shepherd and obey him, knowing that he has our best interests at heart. And there's where we're stopping today. Trusting God with the process is vital to finding an unshakable faith. God bless you today.